Hey guys, welcome to Robert Arms. My name's Rob. I'm the host of this channel. I hope you had a wonderful Thanksgiving. If you're unfamiliar with this subject, it's called Gun Anatomy, where I discuss the origins and mechanisms of common and uncommon weapon platforms. This is a very special one that I definitely wanted to conjure up for a while now. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started right now.
Out of the ashes of the First World War, a great axis of evil had emerged. Nazi Germany, Fascist Italy, and the Japanese Empire. These three nations joined forces in an effort to conquer the globe and plunged it into yet another devastating world war. Their ambitions were halted by courageous men who would answer the call to serve and wielded weapons forged out of American ingenuity. General George S. Patton have regarded this weapon as the greatest battle implement ever devised, the M1 Garand Service Rifle.
I don't think there's any weapon that I know of that can surpass the cultural and historical significance that this weapon has on the American psyche, especially when you hear this noise. I can hear it in my sleep. You saw how I did that? I don't know if you knew this, but this weapon detects high estrogen levels in men. So if your testosterone isn't high and you happen to close this thing up and it crushes your thumb, you might have an issue with that. From 1936 to 1957, this weapon served as a standard issue rifle of the United States military. At Springfield Armory, along with a few other contractors, there have been over 5 million produced. The development of the M1 Garand was a major stepping stone to modern firearm design, using a long-stroke gas piston system and an 8-round magazine loaded with an M-block clip. Making its first appearance in World War II, this simple operating mechanism made it an incredibly useful tool on the battlefield. The fact that this semi-auto rifle was chambered in M2 ball 30-06 meant that it would deliver devastating blows against enemies who often wielded low-capacity, outdated bolt-action rifles. Maybe I should demonstrate. This increase in firepower gave the United States military the edge needed to win the Second World War, and it was also heavily used during the Korean War. And though it retired from service, it saw use with many other countries in countless conflicts since that time, from the Cold War all the way up into making appearances during the global war on terror. This gave the M1 the reputation of being depicted in countless forms of media, from video games to movies, many regarding it as one of the most iconic weapons ever designed. This is all due to the genius of its designer, which leads to my next segment, the lore. This is going to be a long portion of the video, so if you want to skip it, though I highly recommend you don't, go ahead and click on the timestamp I've provided below so that you can skip to the portion where I talk about how this weapon works on the inside. The inventor of the M1 Garand was John C. Garand, who hailed from Quebec, Canada. Why does he look like that? We got to fix that. There we go. The age of 3, sadly his mother would pass away, forcing his father and his entire family to move to Connecticut. And at age 4, he already started work as a floor sweeper and bobbin boy at the textile mill where his father worked, and only a few years after that would drop out of school in the 4th grade to develop his mechanical skills. In the year 1915, he would earn a position at Brown & Sharp in Rhode Island as a tool and gauge maker at the age of 18. At this point in history, World War I was already underway in Europe, with the widespread use of many new military technologies like the machine gun and the automatic rifle. Automatic weapons like the Vickers, the Maxim, the Hotchkiss, and the Lewis gun were mass-produced and issued to troops on the battlefield. One thing of note, though, is that the use of the semi-automatic rifle at the time was very limited. Though some designs managed to make it through production and into the hands of active servicemen, they were often ill-designed, too expensive to manufacture, and worst of all, often unreliable. The terrible performance of the 1909 MLC automatic rifle led the United States Ordnance Department to make considerations to adopt a new auto rifle to issue to troops headed for Europe. Garand's interest in firearms sparked and saw this as an opportunity to sharpen and utilize his mechanical knowledge and skills, and submitted a design to the U.S. Ordnance Department using a primer-actuated blowback concept. To better understand this unusual weapon concept, let me explain how this works. In very early cartridges, there would be an undesired phenomenon that would occur where the primer, once struck by the firing pin of a weapon, would cause the gunpowder to ignite in the casing and launch the projectile as usual, except sometimes the primer would pop out of the casing. In the weapon that Garand designed at the time, he intended on actually using the malfunction as a part of the mechanism itself. The primer would push back against the firing pin immediately after firing it, forcing the bolt to unlock and then pushing itself against the rear of the receiver via explosive gases and cycling the weapon, extracting and then pushing the next round in, etc. Though the Ordnance Department turned down his design, they did see that it did carry merit. This would result in him being led to the National Bureau of Standards, where they would give him a position as a designer to make his vision a reality. This would eventually lead to his first ever prototype, the T1919 automatic rifle, chambered in a primer-actuated 30-06 cartridge with a 20-round box magazine. Even though it performed successfully during demonstrations, it was actually turned down due to the adoption of the BAR, a John Browning design. Regardless, it impressed the Ordnance Department so much that he was offered a job as a designer at Springfield Armory to develop a new semi-automatic rifle using his concept. This would result in his development of the second prototype, the T1920, which utilized a rotating bolt with locking lugs. This weapon competed against other semi-auto rifle designs, but unfortunately it was deemed unsatisfactory and in need of improvement. This would lead to Garand's third rifle, the M1921. This weapon utilized a new non-turning bolt that locked itself in position by falling its rear hinge block over a locking shoulder. These weapons performed well during test trials, and the Ordnance Department requested that a small batch of them be manufactured for further military testing. These rifles were known as the Model 1924s. When further tests against other designs proved inconclusive, Garand began to question the use of his primer-actuated concept. Its impractical use of special cartridges, combined with the fact that it had questionable reliability, forced Garand to abandon its design for a new gas-operated concept. By 1929, he developed a rifle called the T3E2 that used a gas trap system. This would trap gas at the front of the barrel to cycle the long-stroke gas piston to operate the bolt. The reasoning behind why this weapon didn't simply have a porthole cut like many other modern gas-operated firearms was due to lack of knowledge and research and understanding of its reliability. This weapon was also chambered in .276 Pedersen using an M-block clip. This cartridge was intended to replace 30-06 for military service. This weapon competed against the Pedersen PB rifle along with a bunch of other designs during very large-scale tests by the Ordnance Department. Garand's rifle performed favorably and ultimately was finally chosen for adoption. Though the .276 Pedersen cartridge proved itself to be reliable, accurate, and had lighter recoil than 30-06, the Army Chief of Staff of the time, General Douglas MacArthur, butted in to say that the 30-06 cartridge should stay in service with the U.S. military for logistical reasons. My God, that man was a visionary. We should have nuked Korea. After being proven feasible to be able to cycle 30-06, Garand's weapon would finally receive the designation M1 and would begin production at Springfield Armory in 1936. And after further test trials with the gas trap system and facing some issues, ultimately the decision was made in 1939 to convert the gas trap system to the normal gas porthole system as we know it today. The M1 Garand would further go on to serve America's armed forces, turning the tide of the Second World War, earning itself the reputation as the greatest battle implement ever devised. Oh, good God, that took forever, didn't it? I hope I was able to go over that the best I could with the short amount of time that I had. If you want to learn more about how this weapon was developed, I will link some sources down below for you to learn about that stuff. Now that I got all that out of the way, let's go ahead and show how this weapon works on the inside.
The M1 Garand operates off of a long-stroke gas piston system with a rotating bolt. The shooter begins by opening the chamber by pulling the charging handle attached to the op rod. An 8-round M-block clip is pressed into the magazine follower and is caught by the clip latch. The op rod disengages the locking mechanism and the charging handle is tapped forward to chamber a round. The shooter disengages the safety and presents. He pulls the trigger, releasing the hammer to swing into the firing pin, igniting the primer to launch the projectile via explosive gases through the bore. As the projectile exits the muzzle, the high-pressure gases are rerouted through the gas port, directing itself into the op rod piston. The op rod piston launches rearward, compressing the op rod spring. As this happens, the op rod charging handle pulls back to unlock the bolt, its locking lugs rotating itself as it also moves rearward. After the bolt rotates, the extractor pulls the empty casing from the chamber and is flung out via the ejector. As the bolt rides over the hammer, it is caught by the sear. As this happens, the op rod pushes the follower rod, which in turn pushes the follower arm, swinging upwards from a pin as a fulcrum to move the rounds up the M-block clip. When the op rod spring decompresses, the charging handle and bolt rides forward, pushing the next round, rotating its locking lugs to chamber the next round. The sear releases the hammer as it's caught by the trigger to reset it, ready to start the process all over again. As a bonus, the follower rod slowly pushes closer and closer against the op rod catch as rounds are fired and extracted, moving it in a fulcrum until its arm disengages the clip latch, launching the M-block clip via the clip ejector to make its iconic sound.